All right. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It Tuesday. I'm Georgette. I'm the mom.
And I'm TJ. I'm the son.
And we both work and study in the field of psychology. And we are passionate about sharing what we know with you so that you can live your best life. All right. So today, speaking of best lives, we're going to talk about success. So how do you define success, TJ?
Success. Success, I think it's when you get to the point that bad things can happen to you in life and you just still feel the feeling of happiness. You still feel that type of pleasure, right? And just kind of stringing those along. Obviously, the good things still make you happy. Bad things, you can still find the happiness. And the more that you can just string that on throughout the day, the more successful I think you're going to be in the grand scheme of life.
I like that. My definition is everywhere I go, I want to leave it better than I found it. And that's small things and big things as well. So, and I have an example. I remember we had a babysitter once for you and your brother and sister, Jill, if Jill's watching. Hi, Jill. And
could she be? Do you know?
I don't know.
Do we know if we're still in contact? Okay. Reach out, Joe.
Yeah, definitely. So I would come home, and really all I really cared about when I got home from someplace is that everybody was safe and happy. And, I didn't have high expectations, but I would come home and she would have dishes done too. And I'm like, wow, that is cool. Just those little things that we can do every day to make an impact. So everything from that to when I'm old and gray and looking back and thinking, overall, did I leave the world better? So I feel like success is all of that, the little and the big. It's interesting to me how different people's definitions of success can be. Even in a psychology search that I did for that term, I saw it related to financial success. And I thought, well, that's interesting because I didn't go there at first.
Yeah.
Finances.
Well, finances, man, I forgot where I read this in, but they did a study that after $75,000, every additional dollar actually doesn't add any more to your, neurological creation of happiness or pleasure and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, that is so interesting. I think the other thing that's interesting about success is how much it's impacted by other people around us and our upbringing, like how we form the idea of success. I know a lot of first-year college students, first-generation college students, and their definition of success is getting their college degree because that's what's important to their family, but not necessarily them, So I think it's interesting how we even form those ideas of what success is. Success actually changes the chemistry in our brain, which is really cool. It releases a testosterone, which then also increases levels of dopamine. Dopamine is a reward pathway.
It's dope. You know what I mean?
Oh, I like that.
I literally just came up with that.
Well, the result is we are smarter, bolder, confident, and focused, right?
Of course.
And the dopamine pathway is a reward pathway, like I mentioned. It's activated by behaviors. And the more we activate that pathway, the more we want to repeat that behavior. So the thing about success is it actually can become addictive.
That's also why synthetics can become addictive. Drugs, alcohol, because those also release dopamine, but more in fact at a higher level. Well, that's more so a short-term reward circuitry because you'll feel that pleasure. It'll be great, but for a short period of time, then you come crashing down, most likely with your unconscious thoughts being like, man, why did I do that, this, and this? Whereas, then there's obviously better behaviors like reading and eating a nice, balanced, nutritious meal where it's more of like a much lower dopamine release, but you can hold it and kind of
like steady
it for a long period of time. Gives you perfect amount of time to do the next thing that's going to release a little more dopamine in your brain.
According to neuroscientist Ian Robertson, who wrote the book, The Winning Effect, to be successful, you have to be successful, right? It sounds kind of funny, but small successes will increase the levels of testosterone, which increases the dopamine, which makes you smarter and bolder. So even those small successes will gradually lead to bigger successes because of that dopamine pathway that we want to continuously activate. And so if you are wanting success, start small and, keep building on it, and you will eventually get there. The other thought that he had about it is basically fake it till you make it. We've all heard that strategy, but there's something to it. If you adopt a power pose, the same chemistry in your brain is released, just being confident and like, I got this. Yeah. Power pose.
Power pose. Fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. Boom.
I like that too. So one thing that business execs and psychologists agree on is that one factor that's necessary for success is optimism. And we often think about optimism as, glass half full versus glass half empty. Optimists believe their actions have positive effects. They don't blame themselves if something goes wrong. Yeah.
Game frame.
Yeah. Let's see. They also believe that their good things will happen in the future. Whereas pessimists, the interesting thing about pessimists, I think, is they start with a problem. That all of a sudden, a little problem, all of a sudden it's a bad day. And all of a sudden I'm a bad person. I mean, pessimists make that leap so quick from minor setback to, oh my gosh.
Well, that's just the brain subconsciously does that. Right, whether you are an optimist or pessimist, that's really just a conditioned behavior. But we all have that instinctual, just like personalization, and just it's our fault.
Yeah. To avoid pessimism, you need to get involved in something. You need to find a flow activity. So a flow activity is an activity that you get so absorbed in that time passes, you don't even realize. You just get that into it. Because what happens is those flow activities keep you from obsessing about your problems, which pessimists like to do. So take that away from them and it will help. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have to cognitively stimulate yourself elsewhere so that your neurons play less of a role in that thing that you're stressed out and worried about. Almost distracting, connecting elsewhere to help you kind of not necessarily hear some of the subconscious or automatic thoughts that are playing in your head.
Yeah. Other things you might want to do is recognize very quick when a negative thought is plaguing you. Be aware. If you have that same negative thought 2 times, stop what you're doing and then go to that flow activity, or maybe even create a truth statement. The more quickly you can replace that negative with the positive, the better. Now you were telling me something about thoughts the other day, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah. 92% of the thoughts that we have are repeats from the previous day.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting.
And it's because, like, in that 92%, the unhelpful thoughts that, keep flowing through and are more likely to flow through, because once again, that emotional response that they get, it's really just identifying those unhelpful thoughts, writing a balanced thought. Whenever you have the unhelpful thought, try to, shove that balanced thought, boom, 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 through your head. And then with that conditioning, with that practice, maybe that's the thought that will jump into the 92%. And now you will be able, with practice and hard work, now that thought will eventually do what it's supposed to do, which is dim down that emotional response and put your behaviors more in your control.
Right. Love that. Be consistent with that truth statement. Repeat it over and over and over again until you start to replace that negative with the positive. So how to be happy. Here's something that I thought was kind of interesting. Researchers at the University of Kentucky had 2 groups of people. With the first group, they told them they were going to listen to a lovely piece of classical music that's going to lift their moods. For group B, they just said, listen to the classical music. Those who were focused on the music elevating their moods did not have an improved mood. They were too busy focusing on trying to be happy. So try not to be happy, and you'll get there, is what the researchers found. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. And other things are just trying to think about what we teach. But yeah, like obviously exercise, nutrition are good behavioral activation, social connectedness, overall interaction, purposeful or intentional bonds, so your passions, cognitive stimulation. Yeah. Boom.
Alrighty, that's all we have today for success and optimism. So this week, think about your own personal definition of success. Think about whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. And if you do lean towards pessimism, think about replacing those negative thoughts with positive thoughts. find maybe a flow activity to participate, and have a great week. We will see you next week for Let's Talk About It Tuesday.